Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is our second in a series of degeneracy here on Backyard Buckets. We're talking over-unders for wins in the Eastern Conference this week. We did the Western Conference last week. We were just kind of talking before the show. Got to try to make the math work somehow. We're ballparking it. We didn't sit down with a calculator and figure this thing out, but we're going to do the best we can. Give you our thoughts if you want to go cash some checks on over-unders next season. But if you don't cash checks, don't blame us. We're not going to pay you out. Ryan, how you doing, bud?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here again. Have yet to miss it since I started, and like I've said before, this is the most consistent I've ever been in my life.
Well, we
And
appreciate that.
yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm also happy to represent Washington Bullets legend Purvis Ellison here on the pod. Come on, anytime, Purvis. We're available.
Yeah, we got we got the bullets and the tropics in the house tonight, and then we've got Mr. Danger himself. Bentley, how you doing?
I we were talking about cashing checks. I had a big one on the board today, and then Roy McIlroy hit his second shot in the bunker, and then his third shot into the same bunker on 18 today. I was sweating that all day long. Finished one stroke back of the top 20, so I'm ready to make some predictions and win some bets here.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, well, let's jump right into it, man. Let's hop into the East. And again, as last week, green means that Vegas predicts they'll finish above 500. Red means below 500. And I left one black text this week because it looks like Vegas has got them right on the 500 line. We'll start right at the bottom with the Wizards, 24.5. Bentley, I'm going to save you because we are the resident Wizards fans here. Ryan, what do you think about this number for the Wizards?
Yeah, the gut reaction is, whatever number they put, I take the under. Um, but I honestly think they could hit that number as currently constructed. Uh, I would guess they're like a high 20s team right now. That would be my guess. And I think there's some free wins available in some of the lower end of the conference. So I would take the over. I don't think they might have the worst record in the league, but I don't think they're that bad. I think Jordan Poole's going to score a lot of points, and I think that they're going to focus on development. But I would guess they win like 26, 27 games. That would be my guess. But if they won 12, I wouldn't be shocked either.
Well, you're not predicting a 60-loss season, but a 70-loss season is maybe.
Oh yeah. If the bottom falls out and they're like, "All right, move everybody,"
Yeah.
Koulibaly is now the point guard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could
So,
happen. That's a
I think it's
legitimate
safe to
possibility.
assume that your trepidation is that you'll be sweating out the trade deadline if you've got the over.
Yeah, I mean, if they're around like 15, 16 wins around the trade, that's when you're nervous, right? Because if they just
Yeah.
if they just trade for assets, then you probably are screwed the rest of
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah. They'll take the bottom out themselves. If the
Yeah,
trade deadline.
yeah. That I probably wouldn't bet that number personally. I think it's a pretty decent number. I wouldn't bet it. They have a wide range of where they can finish. I think personally.
Yeah, I agree. If Poole is the scorer that he's shown flashes of being, they could steal some wins and get 26 to maybe 28 wins. But for me, I'm curious what Bentley thinks as well. But for me, I just this number feels too high because I think this team is in full process Philly tank mode. And as we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe three, Ryan, you were saying that they were kind of doing the tanking thing correctly, potentially, and looking at it and getting those assets. Maybe it's trade deadline moves to get more draft capital. Maybe it's getting young developmental prospects in some of those trades as well. They have no onus to win. The front office is not going to be making any sort of drastic in-season move to shake things up or anything like that. Like this isn't a middle of the road team that might think if they can get the right piece, they're going to win some games in the playoffs, right? So I think that my worry if I bet the over is that this team is in full, we need as many top 5 draft picks in the next 3 years as possible. And that's what they're going to try to ensure with their own draft picks, and then hope that some of that other draft capital kind of falls their way in terms of some luck with maybe the lottery, if some of those do end up in the lottery and whatnot. So I'm on the under. I think this is going to be a very, very long season for the Wizards. I think that the brightest future, I guess, that we can hope for as far as this season goes is that Jordan Poole averages 28 points a game, shoots pretty efficiently, and a team wants him at the deadline and they're willing to give up a boatload of picks and young players. So that's what I hope for, something along those lines when it comes to the deadline, because I don't see Jordan Poole as a future piece on a rebuilt winning Wizards squad. Bentley, what do you think?
From a talent perspective, this team clears the over if they play like they're trying to win all year long. Kuzma, Poole, and Jones are a good enough three. And despite not loving the draft pick, I did kind of like what I saw from Koulibaly in the summer league. Not that that's going to carry over or anything, but I mean, whatever. It's something, right?
You hope so, right? Right.
Yeah, you kind of hope so.
With that pick, you're hoping that what you saw in summer league is kind of the floor, and he continues to grow.
Yeah, for sure. So from a talent perspective, this should be over, right? I think the under is probably in play here, though. I think the under is probably the safer pick. Excuse me. Oh, I just finished eating because I've been doing manual labor. I would go under 23. That's a realistic number, I think. 22. Probably no less than 20. I would be shocked if they lost or if they won less than 20 games. I just think they have too much talent, truthfully. They have too much scoring potential to do that, right? Their defense is going to suck, but they have too much scoring potential in this team to win less than 20 games.
You want to watch some scoring this year, watch those Wizards games.
A lot of FGAs. A lot of FGAs.
Yeah, for sure.
I think how this season is going to be determined, we can probably call it the Johnny Davis equilibrium.
Yep.
The more he plays, there's probably an inverse relationship with the record.
Mm-hmm.
And if development, right? Wes Unseld's in year 3 of a 4-year contract. He's never made the playoffs.
Nope.
He's had guys, and they wanted him to make the playoffs. He probably wants to keep his job, but if he decides to fully commit to Johnny Davis, and not just him, but these other guys, then they definitely hit the under, I think.
Yeah.
Like their actual best 5 should win some games.
Yep.
There's like legit dudes, but yeah, I think the more you see Johnny Davis, the more you should be taking the unders.
They'll be fun until Christmas.
Yeah. All right, well let's shift gears upward here to the Detroit Pistons. I think we all sort of like some of the things they did in the draft. I think the health of Cade Cunningham is going to be maybe the biggest factor here for the Pistons. Their number's at 27.5. Don't imagine they're going to, surprise everybody and maybe push for a playoff spot, but number feels kind of good for them in terms of, an actual number you have to think about with the Pistons. It's not a slam dunk over. It's not a slam dunk under. There's some sneaky talent there. There's some talent that people maybe don't think about. And then Cade Cunningham has been nicked up and trying to get healthy. But when healthy, he's been kind of the guy they thought he would be coming out of Oklahoma State. Bentley, I'm going to go your way first here with the Pistons, 27.5. How do you feel about that number?
So I'm going to give a slight spoiler. This pick and the next pick with the Hornets are completely injury-based for me.
Yeah.
I don't know how to properly handicap like these two teams specifically because they have dealt with so much injury and quote-unquote load management, if you want to call it that, the last few years. Detroit has a lot of talent potential on that team. Jalen Duren, the Adonis that he is, running around there, just making people, look like they're children on the court next to him. James Wiseman played a lot in the summer league. Don't know if that's a good thing. Don't know if that's a bad thing. He played pretty well when he was on the court. Played pretty well when he played next to Jalen Duren too. But it all rides on whether or not Cade Cunningham plays this year. That the whole thing rides on Cade Cunningham, right? I'm gonna lean under. I don't think this team is gonna try to make a leap. I think probably next year they're gonna go all in and try to do something. I don't love it. I would not bet this line. I would not bet this win total. But I think the under is in play just based off of lack of games played by their best players in recent years.
Yeah, I agree. This isn't one that I necessarily think that you would have a lot of confidence if you bet either way, right? This number, it just feels pretty damn good. Usually Vegas is really good anyway, but some numbers feel a little better than others, and this one seems, at least in my mind, it feels like probably close to the right number for the Pistons. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, this was initially I agree. I was like, that's about what I would think. And I think I'm pretty firmly on the over, thinking about it a little longer. I agree with what Bentley said, except for the James Wiseman take. I thought he was pretty bad in summer league, especially defensively. For a man as big as he is, he controls no space at all, and that's an impressive quality for someone who has all the space in the world to control. Jalen Duren, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. Jalen Duren's great. He was one of my favorite players when he came out because he was like 3 days over the age of 18, but had the size of a 25-year-old. And the athleticism of a person in their peak. I really like how this team is constructed. I have some concerns with Jaden Ivey and his fit with Cade, but I think Killian coming off the bench, I think he's a very good coming off the bench player. I know a lot of people harp on him, but he can do a lot of things defensively, struggles scoring the ball, but can do a lot of things facilitating. I like him. I think Alec Burks is a good rotational piece. Bagley is a good rotational piece. I think I like him. I think Marcus Sasser is going to help them win some games. He's a little bit older coming out. They need shooting. That's a huge concern, right? So Marcus Sasser, I think, is going to get a lot of playing time. And I think Marcus Sasser can play with both Cade Cunningham. I think he fits really well. And I think he fits really well with Jaden Ivey if they alternate those guys out. And he fits well with Killian. I think he's like a perfect guard fit next to those guys. So I'm pretty firmly in the over. But yeah, health is a big part of it. If Cade is shut down, obviously the under's clear. But as far as not knowing who's going to be there, I would take the over under the assumption that they are going to be there.
Yeah, if you assume health, it's probably easy to get there. I'm curious to see this lineup too, because you could see some lineups where you've got three guards and then maybe you've got Wiseman and Duren playing kind of the combo forward center rotational role. Defensively, I think that lineup is really more of a miss because of Wiseman's never been a presence. Not even in college was he really a defensive presence, and I don't think that was what anybody saw him as in terms of his potential in the NBA. Right, the Warriors didn't grab him because they didn't have like a Draymond Green. Right, they knew they had a guy who could help with that side of the ball. So I'm curious, some nights I do believe that they're going to play some quote unquote small lineups. I think they're going to play some really fast lineups that are going to try to get up and down the floor. I do like some of the veteran presence that they do have on this roster. I just really worry about the health of Cade Cunningham. I'm worried that he could be like it's not the same, but it could be a situation like a Brandon Roy, right? Where when healthy, he plays really well. When healthy, he fills your stat sheet. When healthy, he's your favorite fantasy player, maybe, but he's just never on the floor, right? So I'm gonna be cautious with the Pistons. If I've got to bet this line, I'm gonna go under because I don't trust Cade Cunningham to stay on the floor, and I think that's going to be a huge hit for this team. I don't think they can make up for that in terms of what he brings to the floor with any of the pieces that they have. They can't really plug and play anything that gives you anywhere near what he brings. So I'm going to go under only for the health thing. If he plays, 60 games, 65 games, and it's not too much load management, then I'm probably going to lose that bet. And they probably get to maybe 30, right? 30 or 32, I think, is the ceiling for this team this year. All right. Let's shift up here. Charlotte Hornets, interesting offseason. They kind of held the pivot pick in the draft at number 2. Was it going to be Scoot? Was it going to be Brandon Miller? We saw them go with Miller. They're getting Bridges back. How quickly can he kind of reacclimate to the team? How much of a distraction is that going to be in terms of why he was out for as long as he was out? How much are they going to deal with that stuff? Hey, Dad, how you doing? How much are they going to deal with that stuff on the road? How much is that going to be a distraction for the team? How much are they going to really focus on developing Brandon Miller? I think a lot of those factors are going to come into play. And how quickly can Brandon Miller mesh with the mellow ball? Right? We saw in the summer league. You guys mentioned it a couple of times while we were talking summer league roundups that like they didn't really send a point guard with that team to really enable that offense. It was a lot of like Brandon Miller iso ball, Brandon Miller this, Brandon Miller that. And I know that they were trying to get a real feel for what they've got with him. But I don't know how much that tells us in terms of how he's going to fit with a guy like LaMelo Ball, who is very ball dominant, ball centric, and is a kind of a score first point guard who can facilitate, but is more of a score first point guard. Ryan, let's hear from you first here on the Hornets. How do you think about their, what do you think of the 31.5 for the Hornets here?
Yeah, I mean, we can keep saying this over and over again. Feels like a pretty good number. I think in a vacuum, before I start saying why, I would take the over. I think they have a lot of talent. Their problem is like we see it in summer league. I think their back end of the rotation is not great. I love Mark Williams. Bentley knows I really like Mark Williams, and I know he does too. Not for the same reasons, but I love Mark Williams. I think Mark Williams and LaMelo Ball is a really good 2-man game. I think Mark Williams has a little more wiggle than people think he does. I think of him just as a defensive player. I think he has some offensive chops. I think Brandon Miller will look way better with LaMelo Ball, who is a top 3 passer, in my opinion, in the league. He sees things that other people don't see. And Brandon Miller doesn't need a ton of space to get it off with his height. So I think he's going to contribute right away. He'll probably be an average NBA player, which will be valuable for them. He won't be a star because he's too young, but he'll be average. And I think they got some bench. I like Bryce McGowan's. They got some guys coming off the bench. Miles Bridges, I won't talk about him because of his personal issues, but good player. Gordon Hayward, still around. There's guys. I think they could definitely sneak above this. Losing PJ Washington is probably a concern, but I think they can replace him. They got a lot of depth in the front court with some guys who maybe aren't full-blown NBA players like Kai Jones, but show flashes. So yeah, I would take the over. I like their 7-man rotation. It's past that I could. So obviously, if there's an injury, you might as well just give your money up. Yeah. But that's everybody at this point that has no depth, right? Cade's out, LaMelo's out, the season's over.
Yeah,
I like the over.
Yeah, I like that you made that point about LaMelo too, right? The connotation of me saying he's a score first point guard is always like, oh, he doesn't make plays, he doesn't do this, he's not a good passer, whatever. That's not the case for LaMelo, right? And I think that's what's going to help a guy like a Brandon Miller adjust to the NBA, especially a guy that's going to be able to put him in position to succeed for sure. So if they can mesh early, I think that you're going to see Charlotte kind of maybe exceed expectations here for the season. But again, that health concern is always there because LaMelo has missed a good amount of time in his couple years in the league. Bentley, what do you think about 31.5 here for Charlotte?
Like I said with Detroit, this is strictly this would be a stay away if I were betting it, strictly for injury concern, right? To Melo, like he runs the show there. He drives the car. He stirs the drink, however you want to describe it. I'm glad that Ryan mentioned my favorite player on this roster, Mark Williams. Sneaky pick for an all defensive team this year. The dude balled out in the last half of the season last year. And like Ryan said, he's a better offensive player than a lot of people realize. I think kind of the combo of him, Melo, and Brandon Miller could sneak up on a lot of teams on certain nights, You kind of see Charlotte's coming to town. Oh, it's kind of a rollover, whatever. those guys are going to be able to put up points. Obviously, with Bridges coming back, like that helps their perimeter defense. And a guy that I really, really liked watching in the summer league, Amari Bailey, coming out of UCLA. I thought he played very well in the summer league. I think he probably gets minutes on this team, not like a bunch, but like I don't know, 12, 15 minutes a game. But I think he could be really valuable for them in like a rotation spot. He's a guy that can come onto the court and guard the best ball handler on the other side. So I would, if I were forced to bet this, I would take the over and just hope that LaMelo is healthy all season long and is engaged with some guys around him that he recognizes as like real NBA talent. But yeah, to kind of reiterate what Ryan said, past like 7, maybe 8 guys, it's like, yikes! Is anyone here like an actual NBA player? But if everybody stays healthy, I think they could win. I don't know, 34 games, something like that. So the over is definitely in play there.
Yeah, I like that you brought up Amari Bailey too, because I think he got overlooked a lot, not just in the draft, not just on this roster, but in college, right? Hawkins was kind of the darling of that team there in UCLA, and the casual fan certainly, overlooked how important Amari Bailey was to that team. And I think he can be a pretty solid rotation player for this team. I'm going to go over on this, but very slightly. Probably 33, 34 wins, kind of in the ballpark you said there, Bentley. Ceiling probably 36, 37. It's a good roster. It's not a roster that's going to compete for a playoff spot, in my opinion, in the East. But forced to bet this one, I would go over, slightly over, but health is going to make me sweat that the whole season, because if they lose one of those crucial players, especially on the starting 5 there, especially if it's LaMelo, right? If he goes down again, we see how bad that team is without him.
Yep.
All right, onward and upward. Toronto Raptors, they lose Fred VanVleet in the offseason. Feels like they're kind of in stabilize mode. Maybe they're on kind of the precipice of whether this thing is going to be a full-blown reload or rebuild, or if they can reload and build around some of the pieces they were able to keep there. 36.5. This feels a little bit like a reputation line to me. I'm not really sure how you guys feel about this, Bentley. I want to go your way first here. Toronto 36.5. How do you feel about this line?
I think I take the under here. Obviously, Scotty Barnes has the potential to be a great player, right? And we kind of saw flashes of that in his rookie season, and then he didn't take the step that I think a lot of people were expecting in year 2. And now, they lost a coach, so first year in a new system, how's that going to look? I don't think Siakam – I'm not as high on Siakam as certain other people are. OG Anunoby was on the block for 3 first-rounders last year. I would expect him to be on the block again this year. My guess is that they're sellers at the trade deadline, try to kind of retool around Grady Dick and Scotty Barnes. I would take the under. That's my guess. 36.5. It feels like a lot for a team that we just don't know what they're going to look like.
Yeah, a lot of questions for a team that's going to be that close to 500. Ryan, what do you think?
This one's really tough again. Vegas, those guys don't give us a lot of room here.
Right.
And, I wish they
dunk Vegas. Jesus.
It's like they're making money off of our misery.
No.
This one's really tough, right? I think how the team is constructed is really interesting. I think we all know kind of who Toronto likes. They like long, toolsy guys, right, that can play a lot of positions. The concern is their backcourt. Is Dennis Schroeder going to give them enough in the backcourt? Is it like I like Dennis Schroeder? When he was with the Hawks, I was like, this guy's an all-star. Of course, that was when the Hawks were like the worst team in the league. But he's looked good where he's gone. I just can he run this team? I think what they're going to do is run Scotty Barnes as the primary facilitator, and they're going to be huge in their starting line. Like Schroeder may be in the starting lineup, but their actual like finishing lineup might be massive. It might be like 4, 6, 8 plus guys and like a guard. Uh, so yeah, this one's really tough. I don't know how I feel about Darko Rajakovic. Uh, he could be great. I hope he is. And I know Ujiri wants to win. He always does. He's not a guy who wants to retool. Um, so if I was going to guess, I would think they would try to make a splash at the trade deadline if they're near the playoffs, like for like a Lillard if he's available and it gets to that point and he's like, I'll go somewhere else, just get me out of here, kind of thing. Um, so saying all that, I'll take the under. But I can see how they could be. I know I'm hedging every single time here, but I think these lines are pretty good. I think these lines are better than the West lines,
Yeah,
personally,
I
so
agree.
far.
I agree. Yeah, not as many layups. At least not as many that feel like layups as there was in the West early on. The kind of bottom half of the Western Conference. Um, I'm probably under on this one. I think I feel like they're going to most likely be sellers, like Bentley said at the deadline. However, Ryan, I agree with you 100%. Right, Ajiri's going to want to win at the deadline if they're close. Right, they're going to tool up for a playoff push, a run. They've got Drake in the front row, and they're going to want to, keep that celebrity status going. It's a raucous environment. It's a very rabid, very passionate fan base that they don't want to have to go through a rebuild if they can avoid it. I don't know who runs the show there. Maybe it is Scotty Barnes, right? Maybe it is. Dennis Schroeder, in my opinion, I think he's a fine player. I just have never looked at him as a guy who can facilitate an offense in a way that would make me feel like 35 minutes of him bringing the ball off the floor every game is what you want. He feels a lot more like a pesky kind of complimentary player, a little bit like a Pat Bev, probably a better point guard, right? Not probably, definitely a better point guard than like a Pat Bev, but kind of the same mold, pesky, bothersome, good defender, get under your skin a bit. Um, I just don't know who runs that offense. So maybe that's it. If they've won enough games by the trade deadline, if Dame is still out there, and that's the drama that we have hanging over our heads for the first half of the season, maybe that is the move, and you go get a guy who can be a primary ball handler, primary scorer for you, and you just tell everybody else, hey, just go be long, be big, and go rebound, and it'll be those 4, 6, 8 guys and Dame Lillard, right? Maybe like you said, Ryan. But yeah, that's what worries me the most with this team. So I'm gonna go under. Maybe 30, 32, 33 wins feels right around that area for them. I just don't know who's going to bring the ball to the floor, who's going to be the offensive kind of facilitator for them. So, all right, moving up to Orlando, 36.5 here as well. Super long team, super athletic team, got even longer in the draft. Young, very exciting though. Obviously, they hit a home run last year with Banchero, and they're looking to continue some of that momentum this year. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Orlando?
I like Orlando. I think I like how they're currently constructed. Um, they need shooting still. If is Jet Howard and Joe Ingles going to be enough? I don't know. That's their major concern, right? If Wagner is your main volume shooter and he's just an average shooter, it's a concern, right? It's partly why they play so slow. That's part of their strategy, and I think it's effective. I think Paolo and Franz are probably an all star in the next 2 years, like both of them probably. I like Cole Anthony. I think Fultz is like a good veteran. I still think Suggs like has something that like he's just been hurt, especially defensively and potentially as like an average 3 point shooter, which they need. I don't really understand where Anthony Black fits in, but like maybe they're past the Suggs experiment and Black is next in line, like off the bench, right? I like Gary Harris. I think he's going to be key over there. But again, I have to decide who's going to be pushing in the play-in, and I think it's between them and Indiana. I have more faith in Indiana right now. I think this is a good line. I could see them being better than Indiana, but I have to take the under because I think the not that those are inversely related, but I do think Indiana is going to be the slightly better team, and Orlando's going to be probably right around that number and pushing for the play-in. But I like the other teams better.
Okay. Bentley, agree? Disagree?
Give me the over, baby. Give me the over. I love Paolo. I love Wagner. They have a lot of guards. Um, I think their hope is that Anthony Black is at one day better than all of the rest of the guards on this roster. As Ryan knows, I was a huge Jalen Suggs fan coming out. I think he could be the best defensive player on the perimeter on that team if he can stay healthy. So I think their desired outcome for the season going forward is to have Anthony Black develop quickly, play him and Suggs as their backcourt, then Franz and Paolo, and then Wendell Carter. And if you ask me, that's a pretty good five. I mean they have a lot of length. Wendell Carter's an underrated defensive player in my opinion. Every single one of those guys can score the ball except maybe Suggs. I mean, when he gets going downhill, he's pretty physical and can get to the rack. And if his shooting improves like they hope it's going to, he could be versatile for them. And then Cole Anthony is really good at basketball, and so is Marco Fultz. So, I mean, if you start those guys, go for it. Like, that's also a good backcourt. Like, that's probably who they're going to start, but I think ideally they would like Black and Suggs to be the starters, just given the draft capital spent on those guys. But I love the way this team is constructed. I think that they're ready to win with Paolo, surround him with guys. I like the Ingles move. I think that they're ready to do it now to push for that play-in. Ryan kind of gave away a little bit there for the next pick coming up, but I like the over here. I really like the over, and I'm ready to be wrong and brokenhearted.
Joe Ingles is always fun because he'd probably be like the last pick in your YMCA league in a lot of places. So,
and then he'll drop you 40.
Right. The fact that he's a contributing NBA player nearly into his 40s.
I went to a Rockets game probably like 6-7 years ago, and they were playing the Jazz. And I think this was like pretty early in Ingles' like NBA career. And I remember sitting in the nosebleeds because I won free tickets. That's where you get them. And I remember watching Joe Ingles just like shooting three after three, killing the Rockets. And I was like, who is this guy? I was like, I've never heard of this guy, which is embarrassing because he's been a very good player. But if he's healthy, he can still shoot it at, I think, 35 years old or whatever he is.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm pretty bullish on the Magic, though. I actually think they're going to avoid the play-in. I've got them winning and finishing above 500. I think they're probably going to finish like 6th in the East. I look above them, and I don't have 6 teams that I'm picking over them. So 42, 43 wins, I think, for the Magic. I really like their roster construction. And I think my love of Jalen Suggs is also going to cloud my judgment a little bit with them because I fully expected him coming out of college that was a steal of a pick that they got him where they got him. I thought he was going to develop into a much better shooter. He showed flashes of it in college. I thought he was one of the better defenders in that draft. I thought offensively, if you just get the ball in his hands and just let him go at the end of a shot clock, he can get you buckets. Health has been obviously the big hindrance there for him, but I still hold out hope that he's going to develop into a much better player. I think if you put him, maybe it's Anthony Black, maybe it's Markelle Fultz as kind of that veteran point guard in the starting lineup, and Anthony Black is maybe that guy that runs the backup unit, the second unit. I love their length. I love their athleticism. I hate saying this about a Duke player, but I love how good Paolo Banchero has been in the NBA because so many times we've seen guys like him that go to Duke and they flourish and they kind of flame out in the league, or not just Duke, right? Big colleges, but I like to shit on Duke every once in a while.
Watch your tone, big guy. Watch your tone.
But we see these guys that they're just men amongst boys in college, and then they get to the NBA and they don't pan out the way that you would expect them to. Banchero's not that guy, and I just think defensively Orlando's going to be solid. I think maybe they'll be able to speed the offense up a little more this year with a couple more options. If it's Anthony Black, I think he's a guy that can run the floor pretty well for you if you're gonna try to turn up the tempo at all. But I look at the rest of the East as well, and I think that's a big part of why I'm so bullish on Orlando, because I just don't see 6 teams better than them. I think they're going to feast on the bad teams in the East. I think they're going to feast on their bad crossover teams that they play from the West, and I just think that 42 to 44 wins, finish above 500, probably 6th in the East, avoid the play-in. That's where I've got Orlando.
Like that.
All right, moving onward, Indiana, 36.5. Pretty quiet, seemingly offseason for them, with the exception of giving all the bags to Tyrese Halliburton. I think this number probably hinges a lot on how you think he is as the guy that can run that team. So, Bentley, I'm going to go to you first. What are your thoughts on Indiana here? I know Ryan played a little spoiler a minute ago, but what do you think about Indiana? 36.5.
I would be remiss if I did not recall our listeners to the fact that Ryan did call Halliburton a bum. And I said he was a $260 million bum. So just want to let the people remember that before Ryan makes his selection here.
Fake news.
I like the over here. I like what Indiana is building. I will be curious to see what happens to Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. Miles Turner has been available he's kind of like John Collins, like every year it's kind of like, well, is he going to be moved? Like, fuck, I don't know.
Everybody talks about him, but he never moves.
Yeah, right. After seeing his wardrobe on the sideline at Summer League, I probably would have traded him right there, but that's just me. Doesn't really give me Indiana vibes, Ryan mentioned he was choosing between teams that are going to be pushing for the play-in, and I took the over on Orlando because I think they're going to be good emaugh to push that play-in. I also think Indiana is going to be good enough. I think Halliburton is a special point guard, a special team leader. Ben Mathurin is a dog. That dude does not care about anybody or anything except for winning basketball. I think that they're going to be better than they were last year. I think their coach is very good. And for all of those reasons, I'm going to take the over. I'm excited to see what they're doing there in Indiana. I like what they've done so far. It should be a good year for Indiana fans.
Ryan, rebuttal?
I just want to say before I talk about the Pacers is I do think there is a distinct possibility that the bottom middle of the East struggles a lot, and both those teams, Orlando and Indiana, push up. I do think that's a possibility. There are some teams in that historic bottom middle over the last couple of years that very easily could struggle, but I'm expecting a couple of them to hold on. But I think Indiana is the best constructed team of the potential to move up into that next tier. I agree. I think Halliburton is also in my top 3 passers in the NBA list that I spoke about. You can guess who number 3 is if you want.
Just won a title.
Never heard of him. I think Buddy Hield is a player a lot of people forget about, but just a lights out guy from range. I mean, just doesn't miss. And even though he was like 29 when he came into the league, he's somehow only 30. What shocked me when I read that. I think Bruce Brown and Jarris Walker are going to make a great rotational piece. And maybe people look at Bruce Brown and go, how is he the backup to Jarris Walker, or vice versa? How is Jarris Walker the backup to Bruce Brown? But they actually have very similar play styles, just a 4-inch and 40-pound difference in size. But I think they fit really well with Halliburton. I think they can run a lot of actions with him. And I think their ball movement's going to be great. Their shooting is good. They got some depth. And they can throw a lot of guys at you that are young. Maybe Obi Toppin's got something extra here. There's a lot of new guys on here that I think could really push them into that. And then the expected growth of Halliburton, who, even without getting to the basket a ton, is a supreme offensive talent and long enough to really get people fits defensively. So yeah, I'm gonna take the over. I like this team. I think that it's constructed really well, and I think that the guys who are actually going to get minutes are going to be big.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that kind of bottom middle of the East, and not spoiler alert, I've got a very top heavy prediction in the East, and then the middle is going to be like 38 to 43 wins, all the way up to like maybe 4 seed, right? And I think that's where Indiana fits, right? Maybe 7 or 8 seed, something like that. Maybe hosting a play-in game. Probably 38 wins, 39 wins, maybe 40, right in that area. Hitting the over, but it's not going to be a slam dunk over. But I like the way this roster is constructed. However you feel about Halliburton, they feel really good about him. I like the depth that they have with this team. I like that they've got some options to let some guys develop and bring them along throughout the season as well. I like the move that they went and got Bruce Brown. I thought he was a pretty integral piece to that Denver Nuggets run in the postseason. And if they can use him in a similar way, that's what's going to be really important for them with Bruce Brown, is to use him in a similar way that Denver did, because I don't think that Bruce Brown, even in like small pockets, had ever played in his career as well as he did in Denver, right? In Philly, maybe he had some flashes, whatever, but he was so good for that team because of the role that they used him in. As long as Indiana they're self-aware of that and they use him in a similar fashion, I think it's going to be a very good pickup for them. And they could blow past, right, my number and get into the low to mid 40s, right? But I've got them right in that kind of 7, 8, 9, 10 play-in game range, and they're going to finish maybe just behind the Magic with 38 to maybe 40 wins. Good roster construction. It is going to be interesting to see, are they actually going to move some pieces at or near the trade deadline at any point this season? But yeah, kind of low middle for me with the Pacers in the East.
Are you telling me you don't think Brooklyn utilized Bruce Brown in the proper way when they started him at center in their 5-man lineup?
I
know they were being innovative, but
I liked him at like the 4 in Brooklyn. I liked him. He's so good in that dunker spot, which is crazy for a guy who is a point guard.
Yeah.
For sure. And yeah, I think I said Philly, but Brooklyn.
Yeah, I knew what you meant.
Yeah, that's my bad. All right.
Honestly, he could have played in Philly. Nobody would know.
Yeah. True. Onward and upward. Chicago, 37.5. Sort of an enigma team, at least when I was looking at kind of the numbers here. Every year it just feels like, well, Chicago didn't get much better, but they didn't really get worse. Are they going to get as much out of their veteran guys as they've gotten in the past, or are we going to start to see some of that fall off? Bentley, Ryan, let's go your way first. What do you think about Chicago here, 37.5?
Yeah, I agree that they are a little bit of an enigma. They're kind of – so I used to say Portland was in the worst situation in the NBA as far as how their team was constructed, and they got bailed out with the scoop pick. So good for them for their lucky team-building activities. It might be the Bulls now in the worst team-building opportunity. Their talent at the top is on paper very good.
Yeah.
Lonzo Ball might never play another game, who really I think was the glue to this team. And there's been a precipitous drop off since he's been hurt. They look good when he was there, but they haven't. Alex Caruso is a good rotational player, but he's not giving you what Lonzo Ball is giving you, especially on the offensive end. I think Javon Carter was a good signing. DeRozan is 33 years old, right? There's got to be some expectation of a drop-off at some point. Their front court is defensively a mess. They're not going to be able to stop a lot of guys getting to the rim. I like Vucevic, but yeah, he can't. He's not a rim protector. This one's tough. I would take the under probably because I think at some point they're going to have to get off somebody probably. And there's been a lot of rumors about that for a while with Levine and DeRozan. It's like one of them's got to go. They don't fit together. I think they do fit together. They're just the guys who facilitated that team to be successful are just not there because of injuries. They got unlucky. I liked how the team was constructed. It's just it 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 relied on perimeter defense protecting Vucevic, and they just I don't think they can sustain that for an entire season with Caruso as like the primary POA defender. So I would probably take the under. Though they could be a 500 team just off sheer uh, talent in that 6 or 7 guys. It's just if one of those guys goes down, this team is awful.
Yeah.
They're already not very good, but this team will be really bad
Yeah.
if they lose like a front court guy or something like that.
Bentley, what do you think? Bulls 37.5.
Yeah, I would take the under here, kind of for all the reasons that Ryan said. The last time Lonzo Ball played a basketball game in the NBA, he was 23 years old, and I think like 2 weeks ago he turned 25. So that's fun for them. They did get the it was like a $15 million injury exemption or something for their to save their salary cap, kind of. Doesn't really move the needle. I don't know how many $15 million guys you're going to be able to bring in at this point to really boost your team. And they need more than a $15 million guy to come in and boost them. Selling at the deadline would probably be the move. Their guys are expensive, though, which kind of sucks for them. Like, Levine's at a point where he just doesn't play the defense required to make the leap from star to superstar, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Offensively, he's there. The dude's a bucket. He has been his whole career. But he doesn't do enough on the defensive end to really push him over the ledge, right? And DeRozan, his game does not require an immense amount of athleticism. He's able to get his shot up in the mid-range kind of over anybody for the most part. But that only takes you so far, right? Like, we've seen him win a lot of games. We haven't seen him win much in the playoffs. And I think that's just kind of the story of his career, unfortunately, because I like DeRozan. He seems like a nice dude, and he's a lot of fun to watch. But, like, the construction of the team, losing Pat Bev, not having Lonzo, like, they're and Io DeSumo, Ryan and I were just talking about that today. Like, Io hasn't been signed. I mean, that's a guy I think that they could probably use. But for all those reasons, I would take the under. I just don't think this team's going to be that good.
Yeah, I'm on the under on this, and I think they're going to crater this year for a lot of the reasons that Ryan said and Bentley, you kind of reinforced. It feels like a roster that's like this close to impending doom. And Ryan, you put it perfectly, right? That was the Blazers the last, 3 years, 4 years? And it feels like the Bulls are now taking that mantle because the Blazers have moved on and they're going to eventually move Dame wherever they end up sending him. But it just feels like this roster is made up of a bunch of guys that they just keep like, well, this piece might help, this piece might help, this piece might help. And they don't seem to mesh really well. I think Levine and DeRozan, Ryan, you mentioned it, with a good facilitator like Alonzo can coexist because they're both guys that thrive in that game where like their off ball movement and then being able to get the ball and get to their spot and get their shot. They thrive that way. Without that guy, they're not guys you're just going to give the ball at the top of the key and say, go get me a bucket, right? DeRozan's a guy that wants to catch it on the elbow and set you up with a little fadeaway mid-range jumper. Levine's a guy that's going to move around, get an open shot, knock down an open shot, become a much better shooter than I think maybe early in his career any of us would have expected him to be because he was that highlight dunker in the dunk contest. But he's really developed his ability to knock down open threes, especially. But I look at this roster, it's getting older, and it feels like the roster is just more shaky than it's been in the last couple of seasons. I think this is like a 25-win team, and I think they are sellers at the deadline. I feel a crater coming on for the city of Chicago, unfortunately, for the Bulls, because they've been able to sustain mediocrity to almost great, right, for a while here with this roster. I just think it's going to crater this year, and this is probably year one of maybe a 4 to 5 year rebuild in Chicago.
And they just talking strictly over-unders, picking win totals, like I remember last year, DeRozan went on a run where he had 35 in like 6 straight games to include 2 game-winning buzzer beaters. Like when you're picking overs and unders, like those games matter.
Yeah.
And to expect him to do that again, like he just went nuclear, right? Like that doesn't always happen, right?
Yeah.
So if you're really, really trying to grind into the actual wins and losses, like you can't expect those games, like those 3 weeks to happen, you know?
Yeah, and he was historically efficient during that run too.
Yeah,
It wasn't like he was just shooting. Suddenly, I'm just going to shoot 50 times a game. He was making it at a rate that is just not sustainable. So, all right, let's move upward here on the list. Same over/under total here for Brooklyn at 37.5. Interesting team here as well. We had all the news last year with the kind of rebuild and sell and this and that, and the Ben Simmons news, and every day trying to figure out whether he's ever going to play again. Interesting offseason. I think they had a pretty good draft. I think they had a pretty good kind of overall offseason in terms of maybe reimagining their roster to a certain extent, but also being very, in my opinion, efficient with the capital that they were able to get and some of the moves that they were able to make in the offseason here. Bentley, what are your thoughts on Brooklyn here? This number feels, I don't know, almost like you could go. I think we're going to get maybe possibly kind of like we did with Chicago, a little bit a difference of opinions here and kind of swinging things one way or the other.
Yeah. I'll start it giving my pick and I'll justify it. I would take the under. For the sole reason of I don't know what to expect. They got, so we all love Bridges, right? Everybody loves Mikal Bridges. Is he enough to carry a team to 40 wins as the best player? Is he that guy? I don't know. I specifically really liked their draft. I thought they picked like 3 guys that could contribute on an NBA roster. 3 rookies contributing on an NBA roster doesn't usually equate to 38 wins, typically. So that's another reason I would take the under. They have been involved in so many trades in the last couple of years that, like, without diving into it like wholeheartedly, I don't know whose picks they have.
Roster.
Yeah, like the roster is one thing, but like I don't even know who they're rooting for to lose and who they're hoping to win. How many picks of their own do they have? Like what are they hoping for by the end of the season? Because I don't think realistically they're expecting to compete for a play or a championship, right?
Yeah.
Like, do they use
everybody loses?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
included.
I have no idea how you handicap this team because I don't know what their expectations are realistically. No. So I would just default to an under there. But that's the way I would expect that to work, you know?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to kind of gauge who they are and what they're going to be in the next 2 to 3 years. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Brooklyn?
Yeah, I would smash the under here. And they're in a tough spot. Like Bentley said, the Rockets own a lot of their picks and swaps. As a person intimately aware of the James Harden trade.
Yeah, but then Ben Simmons and then Kevin Durant, it's like, do they have Phoenix's picks?
Do they get anything back?
Yeah, like do they have like Philly's picks? Does Chris Paul play into this? Like, how does?
Yeah, they got a lot of stuff moving around. Their actuary tables have to be pretty confusing, I would say. Yeah, I mean, the only way they're going to win is if they have created the modern 5-man 3-and-D team, because that's basically their entire team. I like Nick Claxton, to be fair, not just a 3-and-D guy, but all their talent is at like the same position, like 3s and 4s.
They got a bunch of George Lynches.
They have an all-pro point guard just waiting to come off the bench at any time. He's 6'9", moves like a freak athlete, you know?
Honestly, if they had Ben Simmons, he would fit so like early Philadelphia. Ben Simmons would fit so well with this team. This team's almost built for him to play with.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
Maybe that was their evil plan all along.
Yeah, if he figures it out, like if he's 80% what he was, then sure, yeah, they need a facilitator. They need a another defender doesn't hurt. They need more size, like rebounding. He can do all that stuff. But like Royce O'Neal, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Mikal Bridges, like that's the talent on the team.
And
That's the
Claxton.
that's the same guy, just some are better than the other ones. With slight variations of the same guy. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Cam Thomas is going to be more than just a microwave off the bench. Personally, I don't think he moves the ball well enough. I don't. Lonnie Walker's very similar, like kind of player, and the Lakers needed that, but I don't think he's going to do much with the Nets because of that play style. Dennis Smith Jr.'s become this great defensive guard, but cannot shoot. And maybe that works because everyone else on the team can shoot. But yeah, I mean, I don't know with this team. I think they're going to have to move off these guys, and they have assets to move off. I think Finney Smith could be traded. I think Mikal Bridges could easily be traded. I think potentially Cam Johnson. I think he's going to be a little overpaid, but that's how free agency is. I think Royce O'Neal definitely could be traded. People want a guy like Royce O'Neal. I think they could get the assets back to be like, okay, we're fine with like being bad, but I think they're just going to be middling for a long time because that's just how Brooklyn probably will do it based off how they planned on doing it before. You know, you don't trade for 3 stars or sign 3 stars, trade for, put these guys together and then like just give up at the back end. But they were not very good at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Mikal Bridges looked good, but their record was clearly below 500 and they were trending down, in my opinion.
Yep.
And I don't think they got much better over the offseason. If at all, they probably got worse.
Yeah.
Opinion.
When I first looked at this number, I had to like do a Google search to see if there was like news that like Ben Simmons came out and said, "Yep, I'm playing game 1 of next season," because without him, this feels like a 22 to 27 win team, somewhere in that range. If he plays, maybe he's I don't know, about 10 wins is a lot, but like you said, Ryan, I think he does fit with the way this roster is constructed. So if they can get him to play, maybe this number's right, and maybe the over is the right play with this team. But as currently constituted, and my understanding that, or at least my assumption, not understanding, my assumption that Ben Simmons is probably not, he's going to continue to not play because he just got the news that he got credited with a year of service and he continues to get paid $40 million a year to not play. I don't see him ever playing again, to be honest, until the NBA says, okay, bub, like you're not getting paid your contract and you're not getting your years of service. I don't think he's got any impetus to play, and I don't think he's got any desire to play. So I see this team as potentially sellers at the deadline. Bridges probably gone. We'll see how far down the list they're willing to go in terms of mortgaging the future to fund the future, because they've got some young pieces on the squad that maybe they float out at the deadline. But because Bridges is only in year 5, I think he's in year 4 or 5. But if you're looking to move pieces and get those assets for the future, then maybe that's what it ends up being. Because I don't look at this roster and say this is a 35 to 40 win team. I just don't see it. So unless Ben Simmons comes back and they really mesh and they gel pretty quickly, even with Ben Simmons, if they don't gel quickly with Ben Simmons, I still think that probably the under is the right play. All right, onward to our team at or right around 500 according to DraftKings odds here. Atlanta had an interesting offseason. It seemed like they were trying to make some salary-focused moves. The John Collins trade was interesting because they didn't necessarily get a lot in return except the trade exception. 40.5. Vegas has got them hovering right around 500. It's what they finished last year, dead nuts on 500 at 41 and 41. Still kind of a dangerous team, at least when they have Trae Young, because they can score. He can light it up. He can get hot, but he's been nicked up a lot in his career too. So they're not a great team without him. Really curious to kind of hear your guys' thoughts here. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Atlanta?
To start off, I would take the over. I think it's a pretty good number. I think it's a tough bet, but I would take the over. I think that Atlanta is going to realize that their best team is going to be some combination in their front court of Jalen Johnson on Onyeka Okongwu. I think getting those guys more minutes is going to help them a lot. I think
Where did
Capella,
Jalen Johnson go to college?
North Carolina, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, right in the state of North Carolina.
Right in Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
No, I like Jalen Johnson a lot. I think a lot of people thought he was a head case, but which is fair based off the way he was at Duke.
COVID.
Well, yeah, didn't play many games, but yeah, I like this team. I think their backcourt's pretty strong. I think AJ Griffin is a guy I like as well. Another North Carolina player. I think he fits really well as a shooter, and I think he potentially has some creation game in there if the injuries didn't sap all that away from him. But I really think if they can figure out their front court, if they can get Sadiq Bey involved at like the 4, I would like to see that. I like this team. And I think Trae Young is underrated. I think Trae Young has swept into the underrated range. There was a big Twitter argument a couple days ago about why is Luka talked about as a better player than Trae Young. Well, first of all, Luka is a better player than Trae Young, but Trae Young is not like that far off, right? Like it's not like a huge. It might be 20 guys away from him, but like it's not like he's like an average player, right? Offensively, he is a supremely talented player, one of the best passers in the league. If his percentages can go up, I think efficiency-wise, this team's going to be pretty good. I think they're a slightly above average team, but that they end up with 38 wins, I think that wouldn't surprise me, and I think this is a good number. So, but if I had to, I would take the over.
Bentley, what do you think?
I really, really want to take the under, but I think the over is probably the safer pick. I'm not a Trae Young fan. I never have been, going back to his days at Oklahoma. I do agree that he's probably a little underrated. Maybe not even underrated. It's just the way that people speak about him in their basketball conversations, right? Like it's possible to speak about him in a negative light, but not underrate him, right? I think his shot selection is a little questionable at times. I think he takes shots that are more difficult than they need to be when there are other plays to be made. And I think that's part of the reason they brought in DeJounte Murray, which was not a trade that I really loved at the time. I liked DeJounte Murray. I don't think that that's what they needed. I do like Jalen Johnson a lot. I think that his progression last year and his development was a little understated around the league. I think that really helped them get the ball rolling and finally ship out John Collins because they're a little repetitive or redundant rather in their skill set and body type. And Jalen Johnson is younger and cheaper than John Collins was. I think the over would be my pick, unfortunately. I like AJ Griffin as well. Injuries have taken away a little bit of his shiftiness, but he has good straight line speed when going to the bucket, and he's a lights out shooter when given the opportunity.
Yeah, I think the roster construction kind of saves the Hawks a bit, especially from the John Collins trade, because it feels like you give up that guy, like you're leaving a huge empty hole in your roster, but it's not that bad when you look at the depth that they had, in the front court. Especially if Griffin can be healthy and play, I think he's a solid option there to eat up a lot of those minutes potentially that were left by the trade of John Collins. I loved the Kobe Buffkin draft pick. I thought he could be a really good rotational scorer for them. But then he went and shot like 1 for 36 in the summer league. So jury's still out on that. But I have confidence that I think he's going to come into his own and be a nice rotational piece for them. But it's hard. It's hard when I've downgraded so many teams in the East to not look at Atlanta, that roster, and say they're going to feast on a lot of the bad teams that I have in the East. And I think there's going to be 20 to 25 kind of cupcake layup wins for them on their schedule because of how bad I think the East is going to be. And for that reason, I've got them over. I've got them finishing a couple of wins ahead of Orlando, only because of how bad the rest of the East is going to be. I'm in the 44 to 46 range with Atlanta, probably finishing fifth, maybe in the East. So I'm gonna bet the over on Atlanta.
So they're definitely going under because we all three picked
Yes.
over.
Yep, that sealed the deal. Nail in the coffin. They're going under.
Nice. Thanks, Gary.
Trae Young's going to play 4 games this year, and they're going to go under.
Oh, God.
All right, moving onward and upward. The Knicks, they've just been kind of the perpetual disappointment, were able to drag themselves off the mat this past season and win a playoff series. 43.5 is their number this year. That's a step back in the eyes of Vegas from a 47-win team last year. 3 to 4 wins regression is in my eyes, that's a 10% almost regression from Vegas. That feels like they don't believe that this is the roster that the Knicks probably should have stuck with. They were pretty steadfast in the offseason. I think the money that they've got out there, the lack of draft capital that they can maneuver a lot, kind of made them stick where they're at. The money they gave Julius Randle obviously is prohibitive in terms of being able to make a lot of moves on the roster. Bentley, what are your thoughts on the Knicks? What do you think for this team?
This one is a struggle for me. I did not expect them to be as good last year as they were. I didn't love giving Jalen Brunson a max deal. Now, granted, it was a smaller max than he was eligible for elsewhere, but it's still a lot of money to be the number one as a small guard. And he proved me wrong, right? Like, he was phenomenal last year. He carried that team down the stretch. When you asked me, I was going to say under, but I'm going to go over. This is such a struggle for me. I was a big Obi Toppin fan. As I've said many times on the show, I'm a big college basketball guy. And in 2020, when we got robbed at the March Madness tournament,
he would have been so fun.
That Dayton team was going to be incredible to watch.
Yeah.
National Player of the Year candidate.
AP
I really liked him.
When the season shut down.
Yeah, like I was a big fan of his coming out, right? He's high flying, he's fun to watch, he plays hard as shit. Can't really shoot the ball, but whatever. That could be developed and learned, and hopefully he learns that in Indiana, right? I'm rooting for Obi Toppin. Ain't no stopping Obi Toppin. I guess I'm going with the over because, why not? This team, it's a good team. Like, Julius Randle is a good basketball player. He's a really good basketball player. Jalen Brunson, phenomenal basketball player, right? I really like Emmanuel Quickly. I wish that Tibbs would play him more. I think that he's probably better than I won't say than Tibbs thinks because I'm not an NBA coach. He's probably better than the NBA discourse around him, right?
Better than the minutes that he gets.
Yeah, for sure. Now, whenever Tibbs gets fired and Jay Wright comes in to coach the new Villanova North, I think that they really take that next step forward. That being said, I'm not the biggest DiVincenzo fan. I'm not sure. He's a good player. I don't know what expected wins he brings to the team. Obviously, they don't expect him to bring any wins with him because their total is lower than what they won last year. But if they win 44, 45 games, it wouldn't shock me. The bottom of the East is probably going to be pretty bad, so there's some free wins there. They have a great home court advantage whenever other teams come into play, as well as just every regular night. When other good teams come into play, I'm saying. Spike Lee, the whole bit, right? Everybody knows MSG. Maybe they'll put a globe there, and it'll be a world attraction. I would take the over. I wish I had better reasoning other than I just think that that's probably correct, but that's kind of my gut feeling on this one.
Ryan, what are your thoughts on the Knicks?
Yeah, I'd smash the over here. This one I feel pretty confident about. This team's got 12 legit dudes on it, and they're super deep. They can throw a lot of different looks at you. They got mature talent in Jalen Brunson. Julius Randle had a really bad efficiency year, if he just like levels out a little bit, I don't think he'll be as good as he was 2 years ago. But even if he's just an average efficiency, I mean, this team is just so much better with him. They can throw defensive looks at you. I think losing Obi might be a benefit because they can kind of. I think they kind of need to go small with Mitchell Robinson getting so many minutes and Isaiah Hartenstein getting minutes. I think even throwing like a Quentin Grimes, Brunson, Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, Randall lineup, I think is really interesting. Josh Hart can like play the four sometimes. I think those small lineups that can shoot will actually be good for them, especially with Brunson's playmaking ability and giving him the space to operate. So I would think they're at least as good as they were last year, in my opinion. And I agree with a lot of what Bentley said, though I think I'm stronger about feeling positive about them.
Yeah, I'm really in between on the Knicks. This number surprised me a bit because the Knicks feel like the Cowboys of the NFL in terms of like they just seem to bring popularity, and I think Vegas likes to cash in on that, which scares me about saying over 43.5 because it feels like four win regression is a lot, right? But Vegas isn't putting a number out that they're not going to make money on. So what does Vegas know that I don't? I don't know what that is, right? Because I looked at the roster and exactly like you said, Ryan, like it's a deep roster. It's a bunch of like plus guys. They're not all superstars. They've got maybe one star in Randall. Brunson really kind of asserted himself as maybe a pseudo or at least a borderline star last year at the point guard position. If he replicates last year, he's gonna start elevating himself to that status. I've been waiting for RJ Barrett to become the guy I thought he was going to be coming out of college. I went on record to say RJ Barrett was going to have a better record, health regardless, than Zion Williamson. And I've only been proven correct to this point because Zion Williamson just doesn't play. And even to that extent, like Zion's been great. But I've just been like, when's RJ Barrett going to take these 5-minute flashes that we get in a game and make that a 40-minute sustained effort over the course of an entire game? So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's this up and down of the roster. The DiVincenzo move is whatever. I don't think he's a guy that really rocks the boat on an NBA roster. Josh Hart can disappear at times. He's a $12-13 million guy. I love Mitchell Robinson and his ability to protect the rim. I don't love Tibbs, and I think that's what it is for me. I don't love Tibbs. I don't love the way he manages a roster. I don't love the way he manages in games. He's a brilliant, brilliant defensive mind, but I think he is a guy who wears down a roster. He wears down. Derrick Rose will tell you, first and foremost, Jimmy Butler will tell you what Tibbs can do to a guy on a roster. So I think for me, that's why I'm going to go under, but barely under. I've got them right around 500, so 40, 41, 42 wins. Finishing probably 7th, maybe 8th, right? Battling with Indiana, jostling for that, maybe hosting a play-in game. But for me, the Knicks, I've got them right there at 40, 41, 42. I don't think it's a bad enough roster to where, like, they're just going to crater. But I don't think they're going to win the way they did last year. And I think it really boiled down to Tibbs for me with this team.
Did y'all see what Evan Fournier said about playing for Tibbs?
No, I missed that.
So he's like, he was like, whenever, and forgive me for not getting the reference right, I've never seen it, but he says, like when Goku finds himself on some planet in some revitalizing chamber, just like ready to wake the sleeping giant or whatever. He goes, that's what I pictured every day at practice. He goes, I would look at Derrick Rose and be like, what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah.
Just speaking about Tibbs not playing them.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Moving on up, we've got the Heat with an over-under 49.5. In my eyes, I think this has a lot to do with the fact that Vegas expects Dame Lillard to be on the Heat before the season starts, because I don't think that number would be where it is with the roster as currently constituted if they didn't have confidence that Lillard is going to play or at least be on the roster for 82 games this year. Start your way, Ryan. What are your thoughts on the Heat here? Pretty big number for them, in my opinion, but curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I take the under every day of the week. I don't think this team makes that with Damian Lillard. I don't think they're very good. I've been, I think I have a lot of pretty hardcore Heat takes. I think that people give them way too much credit. They give Jimmy Butler way too much credit. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I think he's overrated. And then every year during the regular season, he becomes underrated because he doesn't play as well during the regular season for some reason. I think Bam is the guy that keeps this team together. But the rest of the lineup is old, unathletic, doesn't shoot super well. They lost a lot of shooting. Like maybe Hero's the guy that holds them together, but I don't love them. I like guys like Nikola Jovic coming up. I mean, I even think Jaquez. And I just don't think those guys are going to contribute right away. More than likely, they're just too. I mean, Jovic is very young. He's 20. This team's not very good. And with Lillard, this team is on a knife's edge as far as talent. They'll have nobody. They're going to have a bunch of role players that just show up if he goes there. That show up every time three stars come together. I don't think that's how you win games anymore, and I don't think that's how you win championships effectively. And I think this team is bad. I think this is if this team finished under 500, I wouldn't be surprised.
Bentley?
Yeah, I agree. I'm taking the under here as well. One young player they have that I do like that's not Jovic and not Jaime Jaquez. They were was it Orlando Robinson, I believe is his name.
Mm-hmm.
Balled out in the summer league. Played in the playoffs last year for them. I think that he probably may be a surprise for some guys this year because my guess is that he's going to get a lot more minutes than he did last year. That's just a guess. I don't know that for sure, obviously. But even if he does make like a leap and Jovic plays and is good, I don't. Ryan said it. They don't have the shooting. They don't have the athleticism. They do have one of the two best coaches in the NBA, an all time guy, honestly, in my opinion, in Spo. But even if they were to make a trade for Damian Lillard, which I'm kind of shocked this line is even out, right?
I was surprised to see this one.
It
has to be the assumption that Dame got traded.
Yeah, I mean that's the only reason. That's the only thing I could think of why it would be so high. I don't think they're a 50-win team. I don't. It's somewhere between 500 and like 46 wins probably is realistic. But if it goes bad, like they could finish under 500 and it wouldn't shock me as well. But I'm definitely taking the under on this one.
Yeah, so I'm going to let the listening audience out there know that they're about to win 60 games this year because I'm as heavy on the under as you two. So this team is not good. It's going to be worse, I think, if they trade for Dame because they're going to lose a bunch of these decent piece role players. Is it Duncan? Is it Tyler? Is it Jaquez? Is it all three? Is it a combination of those plus as many draft picks as they can fit in a bucket and give over to Portland? I also look at this roster and knife's edge is kind of the perfect way to put it, as you put it, Ryan. If you get Dame in and you've got all these old role player pieces that aren't really difference makers, and you try to piece together the Dame, Butler, Bam combination, is there going to be enough around them? Because we've seen Jimmy disappear for long stretches of the regular season. Is Dame coming to town going to motivate him enough? I don't know, right? And we've seen Dame lose a lot of games in Portland as well with less than stellar rosters. So I've got them finishing below 500, probably 38 to 40 wins, maybe pushing for one of those play-in spots. If they get hot in the postseason, we'll see it again. But this is all about the regular season, and I don't think this roster is constructed for a good run in the regular season next year. So I'm hammering the under with the Heat. All right. Upward toward Philly. A lot of buzz about them with the offseason with James Harden talking about wanting to be traded. Joel Embiid is the defending MVP, but disappeared in crucial moments in the playoffs. They haven't made a lot of moves to change the roster yet. with the Harden trade kind of hanging out there. Is it going to be Tyrese Maxey's show to run next year, or is James Harden going to stick around because it ends up being the best place for him? Either way, is 50 wins what you see for this team, Bentley? Philly, 50 wins?
I got to say no. I don't know where James Harden is going to play basketball next year. He posted on his Instagram story earlier today, been comfortable for too long, time to get uncomfortable.
He's going to put the fat suit back on.
Yeah, like, what does that mean, dog? Like, I've been in shape for too long, man. I need a fucking cheeseburger. Like, or does it mean, like...
He wants those wings at the strip clubs in Houston again.
Yeah, right? He and Lou Will headed down to Atlanta, hit up King Diamonds, right? Or does it mean nothing? Or does it mean like, hey, I'm tired of losing, like let's kick it up a notch?
Is he gonna get in the lab?
I don't know. I love Tyrese Maxey, dude's a stud. He probably will take a leap, maybe not a leap, a step forward this year to be a better player. I don't know that that's enough to clear 50 wins, though. Like, Embiid, he misses games. He always does. He did just win an MVP. He probably has been deserved of them in the past. Like, he's played to that level, right? Maybe not deserved, but he's played to that level in the past. He's been on that level for like 4 or 5 years now, probably, right? History does not look fondly upon big men having long peaks in their career. I think that this past season and the season prior were the best that we're going to see from him. Maybe he has another phenomenal year this year, plays to that level. But at some point, Father Time will catch up with him. His feet and his just the rest of his lower body in general. Right? Yeah, and his back also.
He's got the injury history.
I just don't know how much he can hold up, and if that the rest of their roster, Crumble Cookie Harris, if he can carry that team to 50 wins. I don't see it. I would take the under.
And I think this is an important question to ask yourself when looking at can we get to 50 wins? Is Harden, especially if they lose Embiid, right? If the injury history speaks for itself and they have a long extended period of time where they don't have Embiid, is Harden enough to make up for that if they keep him, right? I don't know that he's looking for a situation where he can carry a team. And I don't know that a team wants to trade for him expecting him to carry the team. But if he stays in Philly, I have to believe at some point of this season, there's going to come a time where they're going to have to ask him to do it. And I think we saw him do that twice in the postseason last year. So I think in small batches, I think in flashes, he can still be that guy to a certain level, not the Houston Rockets triple-double machine that he was, or at least the 30-10 guy that he was on any given night there in Houston. But he still, I think, at times can be that guy, and I think that makes it really hard for Philly to move on, right? With the way that roster is constructed, I think that the flashes that you saw from him in the postseason are going to make it really difficult for Philly to move on from James Harden, and that may ultimately end up being how they reconcile. Maybe you go to him and say, "Listen, James, like you're our guy. We want you here. You helped us stay alive in the postseason when everything looked dire after Joel got hurt. You had us up against Boston. Things fell apart and didn't end the way we wanted them to. We think we can make another run at this thing." Maybe that's what they've got to do to kind of smooth things out here. But I still, even with him, 50 wins is a lot. Ryan, what do you think? Philly, Harden, this whole mess?
Yeah, I wouldn't touch it as far as betting it goes. If he's there, it's a clear over, I think, to me. I think they're one of the top 3 teams in the East with him there. I just wouldn't touch it. I think there's just no way to know what it looks like, right? If I had to, I would take the over, but yeah, I mean, there's just not much to say, right? It comes down to what does he want, and I don't think they're going to trade him. That doesn't mean he'll play, though. I think that The general manager wants to make Harden happy. They have a good relationship from their time in Houston. But he also has to worry about his own job to some extent, right? He has to get something back for him. And Philadelphia is probably not in a place to take back like picks. They have to take back some talent.
Yep.
And you kind of have to because of the contract. You can't just take picks. No one can just take his contract on. Maybe there's some like weird like Miami trades or something. Like if they can't get Lillard, like I don't know. It's just the variables are way too wide with them, and that's a pretty high number. But if he's there, you definitely take the over. But there's no guarantees there. So
yeah, I'm slightly under. They're probably going to finish fourth in the East at 47, probably wins 46, 47. I think with or without James, I think they're going to be in even more load management this year with Joel. They're going to try to prolong his career. They're going to try to keep him healthier for the playoffs. I feel like there's some sentiment that, if he was healthy in the playoffs, they don't think he was completely healthy at the end of that series against Boston. Maybe that's how they manage that, and we're going to see them kind of tank, right, in their own way, tank some games to keep him healthy, and I think that's going to kind of even things out for them and bring them back to 46, 47 wins, and maybe they're a dangerous team in the playoffs, right, with Harden. And if Maxey takes that step forward, he's got to become a much more efficient player. He is a guy that can really take your breath away with some of the plays he can make and the athleticism that he has. But he's also a guy that can make you like throw shit at your TV if you're a fucking Sixers fan. With some of the shot selection and some of the boneheaded plays that he makes, he's got to take a step forward and be a more efficient player for them to take any sort of step forward and make more noise in the playoffs than they have. All right, Cleveland, 49.5. One of the young budding teams on the up and up. They won 51 games last year, so Vegas sees them kind of close to that number this year, hovering right around the same area in terms of regular season wins. They feel like a fairly loaded roster too, in my opinion. Mobley, and if you get both brothers to play well for you, Isaiah had a pretty good summer league. Evan's one of the more versatile big men in the league, I think, at this point in his career, working on his shooting game. But obviously they've got Spider and what he brings to the table. And really, I think maybe still a slept-on team a little bit in terms of expectations in the East, because you've got Milwaukee, Boston, and Philly's obviously making news. But really curious to hear you guys' thoughts on Cleveland. This number feels very interesting, I think, for the conversation. Bentley, or Ryan, let's go your way first here with Cleveland.
Yeah, I think really this comes down to replacing Chetty Osman with like Max Strus and Georges Niang. Probably a wash. Like Osman's a better facilitator. Those guys are better shooters by like a little bit. So yeah, I think this team's in the same boat. You hope for some progression from Mobley and even Jared Allen, who's still only 25.
Yeah.
Darius Garland's only 23. This team is constructed really well. Their backcourt is tiny. The fundamental issue Portland had for years with CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard just defensively. This team does the smart thing of putting two rim protectors and a guy who can cover the perimeter, and Evan Mobley can do both, right? If Evan Mobley becomes a slightly below average shooter, I mean, this team is just better. And I think the form is good. I think there's good signs for him to be a good offensive player, or at least an average offensive player and a supremely good defensive player. Yeah, I think you take the over here. I think they're going to be better than last year.
Yeah, for sure. They were in the 50s last year, so any step forward is obviously going to, keep the over in play. Yeah, they've got a lot of talent assembled there. It'd be really interesting to see them make a playoff run this year. So I think they're exciting. I think anytime you can get Donovan Mitchell on national TV as well, he's fun to watch. Went to a Wizards game last year where It felt like Donovan Mitchell was going to score 60 because he had like 10 in the first 4 minutes against the Wizards, but then he went into like facilitate mode and ended up with a double-double. But I think he scored like 28 and had like 11 assists, but it felt like he was just doing whatever he wanted to do. He's so exciting to watch. Bentley, what are your thoughts on Cleveland?
This is another one that I struggled with a little bit. I'm gonna end up taking the over here. I almost feel like they probably win the exact same number of games as they did last year. I want them to win more games. I want them to be on national TV as much as possible. I want to see them. I want to watch them. But barring a large offensive step forward from Evan Mobley, I feel like it's kind of the same team. I know Max Strus is there now. He should make them better. I think that their biggest hindrance as a basketball team is their head coach. I'm not. I didn't love what JB did in the playoffs. I thought he was outcoached by Thibodeau, which that's a tough look. Obviously he's an NBA coach for a reason. Like he obviously knows he's forgotten more about basketball than I'll ever know, likely. I really like this team. I really love the roster. I'm a huge Darius Garland fan. I think he's super exciting. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell, it goes without saying. The dude he scored 70 last year in a game. Like he can go off at any given moment. I think they probably finished top 3 in the East this year. I expect them to be better than Philly. So I would take the over, slight over, probably 51, maybe 52 wins for them.
Yeah, I'm a little bullish on them, and I think it's kind of the reciprocal effect of the fact that I was very fucking bearish on a lot of other teams. Had a lot of teams taking pretty big steps back. Cleveland, I've got them in the mid 50s, probably 54, 55. I really, really, really like this roster. I also like to think of the fact that they've recovered from kind of the era of LeBron James and the Kyrie fallout and all that. And they've constructed a really good roster. I love Donovan Mitchell. He's one of my favorite players to watch. Evan Mobley has exceeded way beyond my expectations. I thought he'd be a fine NBA player, but he's already, on the brink of being one of the real stars in the league. Defensively, he's phenomenal. Ryan, you mentioned he can guard multiple positions. A big guy that can protect your rim, but also play on the perimeter is an incredible luxury to have in the NBA. Just ask Utah and Minnesota about how Rudy Gobert, how much of a liability he is. So having that guy that can do both is really, really important on an NBA roster. Darius Garland, I'm a huge fan. I thought he was going to be a tremendous pro and has done so coming out of college. I'm really high on the Cavs, finishing third in the East. Not to spoil too much of the picks ahead, but I've got them in the mid 50s, and I think it's going to be a really interesting season watching them play, jostle back and forth with the other two teams here in the East that remain. All right. Speaking of one of those two teams, Milwaukee projected to finish second in the East by Vegas at 52.5 wins. Bit of a step back for them. It's always tough when you get to these kind of teams that finish tops in the standings the year before, because how do you project a team to just win 60 games? Well, Milwaukee and Boston were both kind of flirting with 60 games last year, right? 58 and 57 wins respectively. Milwaukee finished first in the East last year. We all know about the disappointment in the playoffs for them. I fully expect them to bounce back. New coaching staff here. A lot of people will say it's probably a year or two too late in terms of moving on from now his name eludes me, but Budenholzer. But he kind of had the luxury of having all that talent, right? And they won a title, and it's hard to move on from a coach that has won a title. The disappointment of the 8 seed loss, I think they're going to be re-energized. New coaching staff, Giannis missing the playoffs last year, really technically kind of with the injury to his back. feels like a big reason, a big motivating factor for him. 52.5 though. Bentley, what do you think? Milwaukee, 52.5. What's that number feel like for you?
I feel like it's an over. The top of the East is really, really good. So I can't tell you how many exactly they're going to win or what position they're going to finish in. But I reckon it's going to be an over for all the reasons that you mentioned. Kind of change of voice in the room with the new coach coming in. Brooke Lopez is back, which is a bigger deal than people probably realize, with him anchoring that defense in the middle and being able to spread the floor for Giannis on the offensive end as well. It's kind of an unsung hero, but he did get a lot of burn in the offseason, though, with people talking about it. So maybe folks are realizing now how important he is to that roster. I like the over because Middleton missed a shitload of games last year, and I feel like I would like to see him play more this year. I'm kind of banking on that happening. I don't think they upgraded a lot this offseason, but like they're a team that, when you finish first in your conference, like you don't really need to upgrade a whole lot, right? If it goes poorly, though, start the clock for Giannis. The team is not young around him. They don't really have a lot of moves to make, I don't think. And we all know how that kind of works in the NBA with superstars now. So if it goes poorly, start the clock, but I expect them to win a large number of games this year.
Yeah, not to mention the rumors that, prior to winning the title had been floated anyway about Giannis potentially wanting to go elsewhere to chase a title if they weren't going to be able to in Milwaukee. And you mentioned it, right? Standing pat sometimes is the right move, right? When you've got a team that finished first, keep your own, protect your own. I think the way that roster is constructed, it fits nicely, and which is, in my opinion, why they've been so successful in the regular season and been able to win a title. So sometimes the best move is to just not make a lot of moves, just keep your own. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Milwaukee?
Yeah, as long as they're healthy, I think it's a clear over. They're getting old. Brooke Lopez is 35. I think they're kind of nearing the end of this current construction of the roster. Giannis is 28. He's like right at his peak, right? Like nearing the end of it, especially with how he plays. I think this will be their last run, but not last run, but getting towards the end of those runs. So I think they're going to really try to push this year. There's writing on the wall. Yeah, I think they'll win more. I think the concern, if you're betting this line, is how much does Giannis play? If they're only playing him 30 minutes a game, then you start to worry about it a little bit. But yeah, I think you take the over pretty clearly here.
Yeah, load management could make this number a little bit sketch, right, as the season goes. I know I mentioned it a few episodes ago, but I really like the Malik Beasley move in the offseason. I think it gives them some versatility and some kind of spells and a little bit of kind of toughness, and maybe not toughness, but a little more of that kind of junkyard mentality that I think helps with that locker room and obviously can help eat some minutes up as well, some quality minutes. But yeah, it is the one thing to worry about is how much are they going to load manage with Giannis in terms of keeping him healthy for the playoff run, because this team is talented enough that they could load manage the hell out of him and still win probably 45 to 50 games, right? Maybe 50, easily 50, even with some heavy load management. But hammer the over, probably 58, maybe flirting with 60 again this year for Milwaukee, and playing late basketball, trying to figure out if they can get that number one seed. All right, last but certainly not least, Boston here. They played in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. I firmly believe that if Jason Tatum doesn't get hurt on the first play of Game 7 in Boston, that Boston plays Denver for the championship last year, but that's not how it worked out. So they are looking to retool a little bit. We've talked a lot about kind of the moves they made, the Marcus Smart trade. How much is that going to impact them? The Kristaps Porzingis trade, how much is that going to help them? 53.5, Vegas has them finishing first in the East. Vegas seems to believe that they are still going to be a team to be reckoned with. I think keeping Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum intact and adding to that as you can certainly bodes well for a win total. Bentley, what are your thoughts on Boston here? 53.5. They going to get there?
Yeah, I imagine they do. As of recording, I don't believe that Jaylen Brown has signed an extension. That's a little strange to me. I have half a mind to think that has something to do with the Dame situation. I want to believe that has something to do with the Dame situation. I don't know that to be true or accurate at all. I like Porzingis there. They're not going to ask him to do a whole ton of things offensively, but he's another option for them if they need someone like that at the end of a shot clock, or even to run the offense through him at times. I think they're a better team without Marcus Smart there. Derek White is a better player than Marcus Smart is. And I know we talked about it on here. Marcus Smart always seems to have the ball in his hand at the end of big possessions late in game. Probably not the best idea when you have Jason Tatum on your team. Again, I don't know. Not an NBA player, not an NBA coach. That's just kind of my opinion. I think I do think they're better without him on the team. I know it's kind of controversial. He won DPOY. I think they win a lot of games. I think Joe Mazzulla will be better this year, just as a coach, right? It's tough to get worse with more experience doing something. That's not really how the human body works. I think if you're a Boston fan, you're pretty optimistic about how this year is going to turn out. Even going to 7 against Philly, you shouldn't have lost the home games to James Harden the way that you did. And then you got to assume that Jaylen Brown figures out how to use his left hand. That's probably your biggest hope for the offseason. It's maybe he figured out that he has 2 hands instead of 1.
Tie his right hand to his hip, right?
Yeah, right. The old Pete Maravich drill. I like this team a lot. Their roster construction is really good. They're going to win a lot of games. Wouldn't shock me if they finish first in the East. They'll finish top 3. Again, can't tell you where, but they're going to win a lot of games.
Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty easy over. I agree with Bentley on a lot of what he said. I think it's well-constructed roster. I think they're all kind of in their peak. Al Horford's obviously not in his peak, but I think Kristaps is going to take a lot of his minutes anyway. These guys are all 26, 25, 27, right? They're where you want to be. They have some experience there. They got some shooting. I think definitely they increase their chances of issues with injuries by getting rid of Marcus Smart and adding Kristaps. But I think they're a better team with him. And Kristaps, when healthy, is a fringe all-star, probably a full-blown all-star on a good team. Probably should have been won multiple times recently when he's healthy. I think Mazzulla is not as bad as people think. I think he's okay. And any team that's got my guy Delano Banton on it, who I love. God, I wish he could shoot. That's why I'm down on the Raptors. No longer having Delano Banton. I'm down on the Raptors, up on the Celtics. No, the Celtics should be fine. You win 57 games this year. I think they're better than they were last year. And I think their minutes, how the rotation's going to work is going to be better. They got a really solid 8-9 man rotation that I like a lot. If they get just average contributions from their guards, they'll be really good.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I've got them finishing first in the East. I actually have them hitting 60 wins. I kind of hated on the Marcus Smart trade for a bit, and I kind of hated on the idea of Kristaps for a bit. But as the offseason has gone on, I've convinced myself more and more that it just fits. Ryan, you mentioned eating the minutes from Horford because I think for large stretches of games, Horford is a liability. He can get you a 3 here and there. He can get you rebounds. He's savvy. He's a vet. But I think the athleticism is still much better with Kristaps, despite the fact that a lot of his athleticism has been sapped by the injuries. I still think he brings a lot more that Horford doesn't bring at this stage in his career. They've got ball handlers. Will they lose a little bit of that grit and grind with Marcus Smart? They're going to lose that nuisance guy that was a pest for the other team. But Bentley, you mentioned it, right? White's a better player overall. He's much better offensively than Marcus Smart is. He's a guy who can knock down. I mean, he was hitting threes at a pretty historic clip, not historic, but really high clip in the playoffs, hitting clutch buckets as well. Not the liability offensively that Marcus Smart can be. So I've convinced myself that I kind of like the moves that the Celtics made this offseason. I've kind of come 180 from where I was about 3 weeks ago with the Celtics. So I'm at 60. I'm hammering the over for them as well. So, all right. Well, that wraps up the Eastern Conference. We'll have some new content for you guys next week. We'll put it out on the page. We'll figure out what we're going to do. Keep busy for the off season. Keep the content coming. But really appreciate y'all tuning in. Dad, thanks for some of the comments. For Ryan, for Bentley, this has been another episode of Backyard Buckets. We are out.